Hello, I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby. Melissa Joan Hart was a Kids' Choice Awards winner for roles in Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Drive Me Crazy. And since then, you've branched out as a producer, director, writer. Melissa, it's great to chat with you today about Christmas in Tune, which you executive produced for Lifetime. It's about this woman named Belle, played by Candace King, a marketing executive who is worried she may lose her job. So she goes running back to her parents for some help. Mother is the legendary Reba McEntire. So let's just start off right there. What is it like working with a country legend, a national treasure?
Oh, it's wonderful. I mean, this movie was developed for a while. We actually were going to shoot it during the COVID lockdown. We put it off because we wanted to be able to have big audiences and do it right. So we didn't rush it. And in the meantime, we were able to get Reba to be interested in it and developed it more than for her. And yeah, I mean, our production company, Heartbreak Films, we've been rolling since about 1995. We started with Sabrina, and we've been lucky enough to produce, and now we have a great deal with Lifetime to be able to produce some movies for them, and we've done a ton for them. But yeah, it's been really nice for me, instead of being an actor for hire, to be able to produce my own material, to be able to have some say, some control, some voice in what happens with my character, my costumes, with the production design, with who the DP is, and that kind of thing. So I love being in the production side of things, and for this one in particular, being able to, like you said, hire somebody like Reba, or work with somebody like Reba, because she's also an executive producer on it, was really exciting and fun. I mean, everybody in the whole United States, the whole world loves and knows Reba. She's a one-name person, right? And she did a fantastic job in this. She's so beloved, from her TV show to her music. And I get to work with her on Young Sheldon, which I direct once in a while. And so I've gotten to be pretty friendly with her. Nicest lady on earth, and has great recommendations for food in Nashville. So
How well did you know her before this? You mentioned Young Sheldon.
I had run into
far
her.
back does it go?
Yeah, no, I had just run into her on the Young Sheldon set. We had cross paths when I was prepping an episode that she wasn't in and whatnot. And so I got to actually talk to her about this project on the set a little bit. And she was aware of it and whatnot. We were talking about it with her. And then I got to meet her on the set again of Christmas in Tune. And then after Christmas in Tune was done, I got to work with her on Sheldon. So it was a little bit of like acquaintance, and then we became more friendly after.
What do you love most about producing these feel-good holiday movies? This isn't the first one you've done. What about that interests you the most?
Yeah, I think this was like number 8 for us or something. But it's really it's tough to pull together. Sometimes we do them in different states. So I like to work where I live, and I like to bring work where I live. So we did a bunch in Connecticut, we did a bunch in Nevada, and now we're doing a few in Nashville. And I love being able to, find crew or bring crew along that we love. I love being able to find these projects and develop them. Something like Christmas in Tune started out from the writers. The writers gave us 10 ideas. This was one of them. It basically was, young girl has to bring her parents back together for a big Christmas concert for the troops. And just taking it from that kind of one log line and developing it and watching it grow and change and move, and bringing it to Nashville instead of Connecticut, and then casting it and putting it on its feet and then pulling it together. And Lifetime did a fantastic job of promoting it last year. And and it became a big hit. And it's got brand new Christmas music in it, which is kind of, you don't see that a lot. And these Christmas movies, they just bring joy and hope in a time. Christmas is supposed to be full of joy and hope. And this genre has taken off and exploded, I think, because during that time of year, people are lonely, people are sad, people are, they might not have the money to put the gifts under the tree that they want to, or they might not have the family around that they want to. They might be deployed. They might, for numerous reasons, people don't have a very Merry Christmas all the time. And so to be able to bring these movies that brings people joy and hope and lets them escape for a little while they're making cookies or wrapping, hopefully they're, getting infused with a little bit of love and joy.
What is it like, or what additional, work is it to have all of this music incorporated? Is that a different ball game? And does it help to have a pro like Reba on set to help with that?
Well, this is where it really helped. A lot of these movies, we kind of have to move on them pretty quickly. This one, because of COVID, we had some time to develop. And, somebody like Reba gets to come in and write some songs and work on songs and recording the music is a whole other beast. Recording it and then playing it back, during the production. And it took on a little life of its own, but with hiring the right people and putting the right pieces in place, having that little bit of time actually helped in this one. If we were to do another one, I think that would be a much bigger challenge if we didn't have the time we had because of the lockdown.
And, what's that transition? What has that transition been like for you? You've had a very interesting career, sort of starting as this child star and then really growing into, having so much success behind the camera. That doesn't happen all the time. Some people struggle. So, what do you credit that to?
Well, my mother is my production partner. She saw after Clarissa Explains It All came out, when it ended, and the job offers I was getting, she was managing my career. I think she was still managing my career at that point. And she didn't like the opportunities coming my way. She thought it was going to alienate the fan base I had built on Nickelodeon. So she wanted to find a project for me. She found Sabrina. Somebody handed it to her on our playground. She found the comic book, decided this was my next project, and off and running with our production company. So from there it was, hire the crew, bring in the writers. What guest stars do we want? I'd be like, I want the Violent Femmes on Sabrina, and all of a sudden we have the Violent Femmes, and that's a fun. Or I want Blondie, and Blondie plays a witch, and we want Barbara Eden, and so we kind of learned by fire how to produce. And it's a really nice thing to be able to have creative control over a project instead of being an actor for hire or just a director for hire. A lot of the time, you just have a little bit more. And we also work very closely with the network. Like we work very closely with Lifetime to know what they want, what they need, what their audience likes. And that's where my mother comes in. My mother is the powerhouse behind Heartbreak Films. And she is the one who, is in constant communication with the network and our executives there. And she's the one who does a lot of the casting and handles the budget and all the, I'm more the creative side. She's more she loves post. I like production, so.
And when you look back at Christmas in Tune, what are you most proud of everything that you accomplished on the production and just the final product?
I think it looks beautiful. I think our director of photography, who we've used on numerous movies, did an amazing job. Our director, chose she had a great style to her. Everything, the production design, the lighting, the wardrobe. I honestly just think it has a beautiful look to it. It looks like Christmas, and that's ultimately what you want.
And if you look back on your career, do you have a moment where, you might not have felt comfortable taking this position? Did you ever have imposter syndrome, I guess, of like, and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? No, I deserve to be in this seat and produce.
Every day, but then you realize everybody else does too. So you're like, okay, I got to get comfortable with that. I like the hardest thing for me was the first time I directed a show that wasn't my own. Most of the time I only got directing opportunities being like working it into a contract for myself to star in. So I was always starring in things that I was directing. So I had a firsthand knowledge of everything going on, the crew, the sets, all that. So I was asked to direct season 4 or 5 of the Goldbergs. And that was probably the scariest thing I've done as an adult, was step onto someone else's set with characters that are already just cemented in history. Like they're known, you're not going to tell these actors you're not going to tell them about their character. You're not going to find a new angle on the set or a new piece of the set to use that nobody's tried before. You just have to bring and infuse the energy. I learned. It literally took me a few days of going, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Wait, do I know what I'm doing enough to take care of this show with these actors, this caliber of, guest stars and this size crew, 200 people, this kind of budget, and yeah, I just felt very much like an imposter. But then I realized that I brought good energy. Everybody kept telling me like what a great job I did, down to Transpo people were driving me to the airport going, everybody loved working with you. I'm like, really? Oh my gosh, this is exciting. Craft service is like, oh my gosh, good job. I was like, okay, good. Like, a little feather in my cap and I feel good and I can do this, so I feel like that happens though every day.
Well, Melissa, congratulations on Christmas in Tune for Lifetime, and best of luck to you and the entire cast and crew at this year's Emmys. Thank you for spending some time to chat with Gold Derby today.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Denton Davidson, Senior Editor for Gold Derby. Sarah Burgess is a Writers Guild Award nominee for Impeachment, the limited series examining the national crisis that led to the first impeachment of a U.S. president in over a century. Of course, it's the story of Monica Lewinsky and President Bill Clinton and the people around them. It's the latest of Ryan Murphy's American Crime Story franchise. And Sarah, first of all, what was that like to team up with Ryan as a producer and writer for this project? What's he like to work with?
I mean, I was so mindful that I was coming into a pre-existing, like incredibly successful franchise that Ryan built. And I think what was so great, and because Ryan directed episode 1, was I first met him through his ideas for my script that I had written. We were supposed to start shooting the show in March of 2020. And so there was a very sudden, I was sort of on that set, they're building the Oval Office, and I was like a very sudden stop for a ton of months. And finally everything came together in the fall of 2020. And I met him at a production meeting after getting notes from him and sort of working remotely in certain ways. And I just loved, he mentioned one of my favorite movies, sort of without even he and I ever speaking about it, The Lives of Others, as a sort of visual reference and sort of tone reference for the show. And I really, as a sort of neurotic, self-involved writer, it meant so much to me that I felt that this person sort of read and understood the sort of anxious tension in the script and where I was going with it tonally. So it started from there, and then he came back and I did a wonderful job directing episode 6, and continued to work with me and Monica on the scripts, and our relationship sort of developed from there.
And when you look back, it's over 20 years later, we can see the story in a different light. It's really cringeworthy now to look back at the way that she was treated. It was, before this Me Too movement. What was top of mind for you in portraying this story today?
As far as Monica and like the way she was portrayed?
Yeah.
Well, to not do it again, frankly, because it's an unusual writing process, because you're choosing what pieces of the story to dramatize, how to dramatize eventually the whole world's reaction to it. And I was working with Monica herself. So I guess at the very beginning, what was top of mind was learning everything I could about her and trying to avoid the trap of dehumanizing the character and flattening her to protect the character, because I felt it would be disengaged. People would be disengaged, and I, as an audience member, wouldn't want to watch a character who I felt was portrayed without some sort of basic humanity and complication. But then after that, as far as what was top of mind to me, became, I guess, so intermingled with Monica's own feelings in the scripts and what she told me about her experiences. And so, of course, both morally, but also creatively, you want to incorporate that and be as truthful as you can,
What was it like just speaking with Monica, working closely with Monica? How much impact did she have on this production?
I mean, what was it like? I only met Monica probably a year into me writing the scripts. So I had written multiple scripts. I'd been sort of obsessed with reading all this whole history, and of course, so much about her and her life. I was so nervous. I've like almost never been that nervous. I don't tend to get super nervous before meetings anymore, but I was just like, had to be wheeled out of the car to like meet her. And then, we had a wonderful dinner, I remember, and we talked about sort of just more thematically and sort of broadly about some of her thoughts about that experience. Eventually, I would write a script, in the writer's room would write scripts, and she would read them and give thorough written notes. That was the process. So I would say eventually in the end, she had a very large impact. You never take every note from everybody, obviously, but there was a process of reading those notes and me as the writer taking them in, and then a bunch of Zoom meetings with Monica, Ryan, Brad Simpson, and Nina Jacobson. All of us would talk through the way we were going to approach handling this. But a lot of her notes were taken, and I would say all of them were taken very, very, very seriously, as you might imagine.
Were you surprised she wanted anything to do with you?
You mean
like that she even wanted this story brought up again? I mean, it's a lot to deal with.
Yes. Yeah, I was.
And Sarah Paulson is like the muse of Ryan Murphy, and she's so incredible in everything she does. She disappears into Linda Tripp. Beanie Feldstein plays as incredible as Monica. Talk about watching, this production, your words, everything you've worked on sort of come to life. What is that like to see them breathe life into all of your work?
I mean, first of all, it was so weird because my background is theater, and I think probably similar to TV and film, when you're not in a pandemic and you're working on something with actors, as the writer, you sort of get to know them a lot as people, and you're in rehearsal rooms together and you have lunch together and you get to know people's like annoying habits and great habits and all that, just like any workplace. This was so weird because I met these people really as their characters. I had met Sarah and Beanie each briefly, I think, before the pandemic, but like once or twice maybe, way before we started. And then I suddenly met Sarah on set as Linda Tripp. So, you know, it's an incredible transformation, yes, but it's also such a brilliant performance aside from that, because I was accustomed to that transformation immediately because I didn't really know Sarah before. And again, you know, me and the actors weren't like hanging out at that time and like having tapas together. So I was just, I in many ways wrote this show because I became obsessed with Linda Tripp. And I don't know what I would have done if a performance hadn't sort of matched my own obsession. And I can, like, what she did exceeded what I even thought was possible. It's a really brilliant performance. And it was really inspiring to me as I was writing to sort of watch her, to watch what she did with that character, even just as a sort of piece of acting, aside from all the transformation that occurred. It was really, really wonderful.
And how do you decide, because you wrote, I think, I mean, at least as head writer, 7 of the 10 episodes. So what is that like behind the scenes when you're working on things to decide who's writing which episode? How do you make sure everyone stays linear? What is that process like?
Well, you know, I had never run a writer's room before. This was an odd project because, you know, I had written 3 episodes. I live in New York. I came out to LA. We had a writer's room for about 3 months with 3 writers. And my producer, Brad Simpson, had always been very involved in the dramaturgy of American Crime Story. So he worked with us in that process too. I think, you know, you break a story together with people, you get to know, I think, the things that they're interested in. You also have read their writing, and then you kind of try to assign scripts based on that, but everyone writes a script. And then you work with them from there in all sorts of ways. As far as how does everything remain linear, you know, this is a very narrow slice of history. So it was quite clear, the episodes that were drafted by the people, written by other people, it was quite clear what exactly they would writing. I think I would say about they would be writing. I would say about that. This was a very tightly controlled, well-organized story, I think, from the beginning with episodes 1 through 9.
And you've dealt with serious topics in the past, shows like compliance. You know, what about these types of subject matters do you gravitate to, and you know, what makes them feel the most rewarding for you?
I'm writing something now that's like about like the most controversial issue, and every day I'm just like like walking to Houston Street. I don't know. There's something in it to me. I always suffer if I write something polarizing because I'm always surprised, and then I'm always like, well, of course this is polarizing. People have very strong feelings about, for example, the Clintons and sex in the workplace and all that. Like, this obviously is what you do in some way. I can't totally answer that, except for that there's a lack of, a piece of it is the Linda thing. I like the idea of, there's something about a person who everyone hates, and I have a strong need, if I can see something sort of human in that person, I have a strong need to try to sort of see the story through their eyes. And then with Monica, obviously as well, this person who's like sort of was completely unfairly treated. You know, how do you not correct that from a political or moral stance, but define like the untold story is very, I guess, is gratifying to me in some weird way that I can't totally, you know, control, because I did not feel a moral obligation to sort of tell Linda Tripp's story, obviously, because she was obviously largely in part responsible for what happened. It's not about turning someone into a hero. There's just it's hard to know sort of what compels you, I guess. But I don't know, we'll see. I would love to write like a pleasant comedy about like my lesbian marriage, but I can't figure out how to do it, but I will try.
Maybe someday. Well, Sarah, congratulations on Impeachment for FX. It's streaming on Hulu, and best of luck to you, the entire cast and crew at this year's Emmys. And thank you for spending some time with Gold Derby today.
Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby. Justin Noble is the co-creator, co-executive producer, and co-writer of The Sex Lives of College Girls on HBO Max. It's about 4 18-year-old freshman roommates at the fictional Essex College and explores hormones, contradictions, sexually active college girls. You know, this show's so funny, but it also has real depth to it. You created it with Mindy Kaling. You know, what did the two of you talk about, and what did you want to portray with this series?
Well, Mindy and I met together on Never Have I Ever, where we worked before this. And both of us kind of, I think, have the same ethos towards comedy, which is just like cracking a story where there's characters that have a lot of heart and a community together, and then just filling it with as many jokes as we can fit. We both come from that like network comedy mold, with Mindy from the Mindy Project and The Office, of course. And then I did 6 years of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which was like a very joke dense show as well. And we just like making easy, fun stories that people can laugh at, like comedies that have comedy, which is the type of comedy that I remember and love.
Talk about, how you walk that line also of being sex positive, showing women as sexual. There's a lot of sexual activity, but there's also, talk about assault and consent. So how do you walk that line and show it in a funny yet meaningful way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like I am a borderline stereotypical gay man writer whose like friend group has always been the funniest women I can find in high school, college, and beyond. So like this show was very fun for me to get into creatively, because I basically got to hire writers who would then like resemble the friend groups that I would talk to at brunch. And it was like hearing all of their stories about their sexual exploits in college would fuel the stories that we tell on this show. So the most fun part of my day is like when we're in the writer's room and it sort of becomes a borderline sex therapy session where someone will come back and be like, I can't believe I'm going to tell this story, but my sophomore year, this thing happened. And then they're just like telling you this like very intense, funny sex story of awkwardness and this like trying time in our lives when we're figuring ourselves out. And everyone else is just like politely nodding along. There's like a writer's assistant writing a note card that has like something horrific on it. And you're just like, okay, I think we got that down. That's horribly embarrassing. And perhaps that's good for Kimberly or Bella. And we just give it to our characters and tweak it from there. But in terms of what you were saying about making sure we hit like issues, Mindy and I are like really big on research. One of the other fun things we did on this show is we did a research trip to go to colleges and talk to actual students about issues that they're dealing with, both light and heavy. And that ended up being like such a fantastic and like wonderful learning experience to hear what 20-year-olds and 21 and 22-year-olds are dealing with right now, and making sure that we could create a show that would resonate for them.
What was the casting process like? Because the four leads are fantastic. Aaliyah, Amrit, Pauline, and Renee. So they sort of run the show, and then their parents are hilarious as well, supporting roles. But where did you get those four, and just how did you decide on those?
I mean, casting is the best writing, is the trick. I think if we can just spend as much time casting as possible and finding every little diamond we can, that's it makes all of our lives on the producer and writing side so much easier, because they're so incredibly talented. So with us, we kind of had a lucky situation. It was one of the few things that came out nicely from COVID, which was that we were in a holding pattern for our show. We couldn't start filming. And so that allowed us to kind of just keep casting. And so we just kept looking and looking and looking and just putting people in our pocket a little bit, but not quite putting any ink to paper yet. And then finding the group that we thought would cohesively represent the best, soup for the show. Everyone was a little ingredient that we wanted to mix together. So we really just took our time and kind of played chemists, and it worked out. And it was so fun to then watch, like send them off into the world they had never met before in person. And then on the first day, when we're like making sure that we like their hair and their makeup and their outfits, it was like watching four best friends who already had this camaraderie between them, which was so like kind of moving. And in fact, like it made for the biggest note I would give all season was like, remember you just met. Like you were like names on a piece of paper that got sent to you in the mail. I'm showing my age. I'm like in my mid 30s. I think everything probably comes electronically now, but you're not like already best friends. Like we have to like build to that a little bit, but they were off and running there. So it was very fun and cute to see.
I mentioned some veteran actors play the parents, and I love that table scene in the parents visit episode. I know that's one that you wrote. Can we talk about just that? What led to you thinking about that scene? Because everyone's together, all the kids, all the parents, It's so funny. I especially love Sherry Shepherd and Rob Hubel and their interaction. Talk about what led to that idea and writing that episode.
Yeah, so Mindy and I co-wrote that episode, and that was we co-wrote, the pilot and that together. And it was something that we had in from the pitch because we felt like the story of the show is like, we don't get to see a lot of college shows, but it's a real transformative time. And it's hard to show a transformation story when you're inside a character's head, especially if they've been launched into a new world where no one knew who they were before. So the parents are kind of in a very unique position to be able to check in with them and clock how they've changed over these first, 2.5 months of college. So we thought that would be a great way to like kind of show that this person has moved in this way. We have like eyes who know them better than these people who they've just lived with, who can voice about things that they've gone through and what they're witnessing. And then it was just so fun to watch this very young cast who was like, learning TV for the first time, mostly interacting with these like industry veterans. And it was so fun. Like at lunch, they would come up to me and be like, I just love watching Sherry. I'm learning so much from seeing how Rob handles things. And it was like a fun little intergenerational day, or actually 3 days at a restaurant in the Valley. We had a great time.
And the show doesn't hold back. It's bold, it's progressive. There's a naked party. There's a lot of sex. I mean, it's right in the title. Did you face a lot of pushback in trying to get this made, or was it pretty seamless?
Actually, no. The partnerships with Warner Brothers and HBO Max have been incredible. Like, I think every step of the way, it felt like we were just being kind of championed and that they loved the creative and they were pushing us along to the point where sometimes I would get off the phone and be like, I wish they had a couple notes. I'm feeling worried, that they're not giving us all the attention. But it's nice to know that they believed in it, and they definitely pushed along that ethos we were talking about of being sex positive. Like that is a movement that we both feel strongly about, and it was something that they got fully behind. We had no pushback. If anything, sometimes they pushed us further. And then Mindy and I, who were like a little prudish at times, would be like, oh, that's too far. Like there was a early cut of the Naked Party episode that had so much nudity. And we were still, it's a season 1. We're trying to find what the show is tonally. And we were like, this is just like jarring. We can't have it be this. And so we opted for a more tamed down version, if you can believe it.
What's the most difficult thing, in your opinion, for a comedy to become successful?
I mean, the biggest thing for me, I would say, is like there's so much of comedy that comes out of like a writer's room and how the writers in the room speak and pitch for the characters. And then there's the real jump is the passing that off to a cast and then hoping that it translates in a way where it's going to work for that character. It's going to feel believable both to the performer and to the character that we've established. And sometimes you never know. But that's just a unique thing that I've experienced my entire career with comedy. I remember like on an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine once we like broke an episode where Terry Crews was like having a grumpy day and being like super sarcastic. And it was like a shade on him we had never seen before. And we wrote it and brought it to table. And then we were like, this is feeling rough. This is like, it just doesn't, like some things just like don't work and you have to see them on their feet and change. So, I mean, I'm that comedy writer who'll say it, which is that I think we have to do all the work that a drama does. And then we have to stay till 11 to just make sure it has as many jokes as we can fit in there as well. But yeah, we're just joke people. We really like making comedy that makes people laugh.
Well, Justin, congratulations on The Sex Life of College Girls. It's streaming on HBO Max, and best of luck to you and the entire cast and crew at this year's Emmys. Thank you for spending some time with Gold Derby today.
Thanks so much, Den. Bye.
Hello, I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby. Oscar winner Dustin Lance Black is the creator, writer, and sometimes director of Under the Banner of Heaven from FX, streaming on Hulu. It's about a devout detective whose faith is tested as he investigates a brutal murder seemingly connected to an esteemed Utah family. Lance, tell us about how you first became connected to this. It's based on a book. And, what's your personal connection to everything and why did you decide to adapt it?
Yeah, I mean, I was born into a Mormon home and raised in a devout Mormon home. so it started well before the Property, which came out around 20 years ago. I as a kid, really, I started wondering why my mother was treated so differently in this faith that I will be frank, I really cared for. It felt like home. It's all I knew. And those questions about why my mother was treated differently, why the church did not intervene when violence entered our home, why they seemed to place the blame at her feet. Those questions ate away at me because I wasn't allowed to ask them. And that in Mormonism, you were supposed to doubt your doubts, put those questions on a shelf. And I was obedient. I did that. I would leave the church with my mom when I was a teenager, and I tried to just put it out of mind. And then when Under the Banner of Heaven came out about almost 20 years ago now, I, of course, started hearing about it from my family, some who were angry about it, some who said, you need to read this. And I did. And it answered a lot of those questions. It answered questions I didn't know to ask. It was like a lightning strike for me, opening my eyes to this world that I was born into, and that really formed me. So, it took a very long time before I was at a place in my career where I could get a John Krakauer to say yes, to trusting me with that property. And then it would take a lot of failing over many years to turn it into a feature film. That's what it began as. And it was only a few years ago when the limited series became this, this form that would hold a drama like this and that people would tune into, that I said, okay, I couldn't do it as a feature. There was not room to tell this story in a way that honored the book, that went deep enough to help people understand what this faith was, and the connection between its history and this crime. And so I went for it. I think it went from something that was deeply personal to something that felt necessary in the past many years. For those who haven't tuned in or don't know about it, it is about a family that hits hard times, a true story, in the Utah Valley. And they decide that they want to try to turn the clock back, if that sounds familiar, to go back to the good old days. And they start following fundamentalist, originalist interpretation of legal documents, including the US Constitution. That sounds familiar. And then take it even further and decide they're going to follow the Bible and the Book of Mormon literally. And so now I'm sitting on a property that's not just deeply personal, but I felt like is an absolute cautionary tale of our times, in a world that has hit hard times, where people are struggling, people's lives do feel smaller. There are many people who are turning back to fundamentalist documents in hopes that it'll feel like a foundation. And this story, and my fervent belief is that is not a foundation, that is a fallacy. The past is gone. And those rules were written by men almost exclusively who did not know what we know now. Even if they did mean well, and I'm not sure they all did. This following those dusty ancient documents is a road to ruin. And in the case of this true story, it led to bloodshed. So, I hope people see it. And if they see family members or neighbors who are going down that path, I hope they say, hey, that's not the way to go. That's not the way to get things back to better again.
Yeah, there's such a relevance to it. And I mean, it could be said for religion or just, following what people are saying in general. What's fascinating to me is that it's a true crime story and there's a lot of those, but we don't often get a viewpoint from a detective that's so centered in religion, especially one that's a Mormon.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what that was like to bring to the screen. Were you concerned about being criticized? Were you just prepared to be criticized, or what was that like?
I mean, listen, there are 3 story skeins in the show. 2 of them are based on true stories, whether that's the history of the church or the crime itself. The investigation is a dramatization. It's a fictionalization. There was no Jebediah Pyrie or Bill Taba investigating this case. They're created in order to help the audience step into this story in an investigative, true crime fashion, but what's particular to this show is faith. And what happens when you question faith deeply? And what's really unique about Mormonism in the Salt Lake Valley is that you are not supposed to ask questions about the past. You're not supposed to probe too deeply, as I said before. And so what happens when an investigator has to do that in order to serve, in order to try and find justice for those who are slain? Well, this is what happens. If you probe too deeply, if you ask these difficult questions, it might start to crack your faith. And I hadn't seen that story, but I'd experienced that story, and I'd shared, that experience with a lot of people, and I felt like that was my way in. Thankfully, it helps defy some of the investigative tropes. I was able to have him have a good family life and a good home life, which doesn't often happen to an investigator. But if you're asking challenging questions in the Utah Valley in this time, it's going to threaten that family. It's going to threaten your place in that community. So that's another, now you sort of can see where my feet are standing. If I throw the door open and let the light shine in on the Mormon faith, my childhood faith, the Mormon church is not going to be pleased with that.
Right.
That's not what we're supposed to do. And, the Mormon church is deeply uncomfortable with anybody on the outside discussing the faith, frankly, anyone on the inside discussing the faith publicly. But I feel like it's time we have to do that. I mean, this is an American-born faith that is among the most misogynist faiths on the planet Earth today. And I'm sorry to say that, because I have family I love who are still in the faith. But it's time for them to take a close look at that, and to ask why they are still to this day encouraging families and children to pray to a misogynist God who would treat women the way women are treated in certainly the fundamentalist Mormon faith, but also in the mainstream Mormon faith. Women are not treated equally or as equally capable. So they're not going to like it, and there is pushback, and there will be criticism, but I'm here for it. Bring it. And if people want to know what's true and right, I encourage them to do their research. It will be eye-opening.
And I mean, you get Andrew Garfield to star. I mean, he's had an incredible year, Oscar nominated for Tick, Tick, Boom. He has so much range as an actor. What was that like for you to get that, lead and, be able to go from there? So probably breathe a sigh of relief when someone like that comes on board.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is I needed someone of his caliber to get a green light. Like, people aren't jumping up and down to green light these sorts of shows, and that challenge the status quo in this way. And he was the first person that came to mind, mainly because I'd met him a couple times, but I paid attention to the choices he was making and some of the things he had said about faith and doubt. And I didn't know where he stood in terms of his own faith, but at least I knew he was thoughtful about these things, and that's what I wanted, was someone who would come and be thoughtful about it, who'd want to do his own homework, and so I mean, I was just really lucky that he had the time and the space to consider it, and that he responded to it, and that in our very first meeting, my hopes were confirmed that he would dig deeper, he would put pressure on it. And that's what you want in a cast, isn't just people to help your imagination come to life, but for me, in my experience, it's been, cast actors who are smart and thoughtful and creative, and they put pressure on the words, and it turns the words into steel, hopefully. And that's what he did, and he was up for that. So was I. So, this whole cast, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Let's be real.
Andrew and the whole cast were fantastic. Such a thought-provoking story. And Lance, congratulations on Under the Banner of Heaven for FX. It's streaming on Hulu. The best of luck to you and the entire cast and crew at this year's Emmys. And, thank you for spending some time with Gold Derby today.
Thanks, Denton, very much.
Hello, I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby. Gloria Calderon Kellett is the creator, executive producer, and sometimes star of With Love on Amazon Prime. The series follows the Diaz siblings, Lily and Jorge, who are on a mission to find love and purpose. And it's really this big family, full of love, a little bit of drama. Gloria, what inspired you to write the pilot episode and get this show started?
Well, I love Christmas movies. I've watched all of Melissa's movies. They're fabulous. Christmas is a big time for Latinos. And it was during the pandemic. It was the height of the pandemic. We were sort of feeling it's probably not going to be with our families this year. We're probably all going to have to be siloed. And that mixed with sort of this barrage on my Instagram feed of violence against Black and brown and queer and Asian people, plus wanting so much this salve that, that Christmas movies provide, but don't often provide to people of color. So I really thought I'd love this for us, right? This is such a feel good, beautiful genre, and it really doesn't exist for us. So is there a way that I could do it and include these communities and really talk about a big Latino family in the midst of Christmas and then other holidays? And so that's how I presented it. I didn't just present the Christmas episode to Amazon. I presented, what would it look like if we pick up with this family and follow them over the course of a year? And the day we just come in on the most heightened days, which are often holidays. And they were so lovely and put it into production so quickly. And we got it out. We got it out in December, right in time for Christmas.
I love the holiday aspects. And was that also a way to sort of progress the characters a little more quickly for a series? Because you're like, okay, it's 4 months has gone by, or sometimes less, sometimes it's a week from Christmas to New Year's. Is that just a way to sort of progress and then we get to sort of peak a little bit?
Exactly. And it's also, I love writing myself into a corner as a writer. I would every year on One Day at a Time as well, we would end it going, well, we don't know, when you're making something for streamers, you never know what's going to happen. Is this all you get to tell, or are you going to get to continue this story? So the idea that each episode we'd have to end it in a satisfying way, and then we'd have to pick it up in a way that, how do we let the audience know what happened in the 2 months that passed, in the 4 months that passed, so that they could enjoy this episode, became a real challenge of how to do that organically and not feel too pipey and feel like you're really getting to feel what these people are going through in one calendar year. So it was a really fun challenge, and one that the actors really enjoyed as well, in terms of tracking what their characters would be feeling emotionally and what they would look like, and all of that was so fun.
Talk about your production company, Glow Nation, and what type of projects you want to focus on, and how you partnered with Amazon to bring this series to TV.
Well, my real passion, when I came to Hollywood, I thought I was going to be an actor. I'm classically trained. I went to drama school in England, and just 15 years ago, all the parts were gangbanger's girlfriend and gangbanger's sister. That was, I'm not kidding. All the parts that it was never like the best friend, or that never. It was, I'd go in and they'd be like, Julie, put the gun down. Orale. I wish I was joking, but that is really the truth. And it really pained me that stories about my community were so siphoned, and that we really weren't seeing ourselves, especially, Latinos are almost 20% of the population in the US, still only 5% of what you see on TV. And that 5% is largely marginalized roles. And we saw that with the actors. Benito Martinez, who plays the father on this show, is so funny and goofy. All he's ever played are murderers and maybe a cop sometimes, but mostly bad guys, or very serious, the cop that's very serious. And there's so many multitudes. And, my friend America Ferrera recently did an interview where she talked about Latino erasure in this country, and how not seeing yourself on television is like growing up in a house without pictures of you on the frames. On the wall. And I that really resonated with me. There is this erasure of our stories, and yet we are such a huge part of this country. So for me, I started to go, all right, I need to hold the pen. I need to revisit how I want to tell stories. And maybe it's not as important that I'm in front of the camera because someone else is in charge of that narrative. Maybe I need to be in charge of that narrative. So that's when I started, teaching myself went to the Museum of TV and Radio. This is 20 years ago now. And started to go down that journey and got into writers' rooms, and for 15 years was a journeyman writer on so many other shows to just learn how to do this, so that when I was sitting in the showrunner chair, I would know how to do it, know how to be a good showrunner, but also really highlight stories from marginalized communities. And the more I'm on panels and talk to different people, the more I would see that that's so much of what we're doing, right? People are trying to tell a story that they haven't seen from their own unique perspective, highlighting something that's important to them. That's what's meaningful to all of us in storytelling. So for me, my focus is really always going to be Latino. Latinos will always be on the poster of my stuff, but also other communities that I think are doing this work with us arm in arm. And I've always been so fortunate to have wonderful white allyship in Norman Lear and Mike Royce, and certainly at Amazon, to help me tell those stories, because people see the importance of making sure that we also get to see Black and brown and queer and Asian joy, not just trauma, on our screens, how meaningful that is. And just, a young girl falling in love may not seem like it's that groundbreaking, but we have done it with Latino leads. She falls in love with an Afro-Latino guy. Afro-Latinidad is also nowhere on American television. Both of our Afro-Latino actors have only ever played Black roles. They've never gotten to play the totality of their identity until this show. So that was really meaningful to us. And then certainly Isis King, being the first trans love story in a Christmas rom-com ever, has a beautiful story where they are loved by their family. Any trauma, it's not to say that trauma hasn't happened and that this is just rose-colored glasses, but it's interesting to see, I'm 47, people I have more than one LGBTQ person in my family, and that all happened years ago. No one cares anymore. All that's left is the love. And so that's important to see. What does it look like when everyone's over it? And now it's when you're having kids, like they're getting it, like everybody is getting it. And it's beautiful. And so just a celebration of all of that really felt like, oh, let's do that. And making it was just as healing, I think, as I think the fans' response to watching it.
Is there a particular episode or scene that you love the most? One that sticks out to me is when the whole family is in the living room and the grandma calls everyone around to ask questions about bisexuality. She's like, "Come on, he's a bisexual. Let's ask questions." What's your favorite episode or scene with that whole cast?
I also love all the family scenes. That for me felt like, oh, this is what it was like. This is what it felt like when all of us would get together and inappropriate things would happen. And my parents are in their 70s and are very curious people, and they're really trying, right? So they're always, we just had a big conversation about non-binary and they, them, and my dad's just trying to wrap his brain around. So he's like, okay, I got questions. And bless his heart that he has questions, right? Let's all enter spaces where we can be flawed as we're doing this work of finding our way to each other. And so to be able to model that on TV and have these characters behave the way I'm so grateful my parents behave, two old Catholics, right? Who are really trying to figure it out and trying to build love in their hearts for people that don't think exactly the way they think, really was meaningful. For me, I think I like the New Year's episode because we put in all of these. Latinos have really funny New Year's traditions. All of us are, across the 19 countries under the umbrella of Latinidad, we all have something. And so seeing those, I've never seen them on TV ever in my life. Like, we go around the block with a suitcase to bring in, travel into your year. And we eat we shotgun 12 grapes right before midnight. Like, there's all these little things that all of us do, but never have I seen it on TV. And so that was also the stuff that really resonated, I think, with audiences when they were like, oh my gosh, we can't believe you did the uvas. That means grapes in Spanish. Because it's me. It's like, that's me, right? That's me. I see myself. And it just feels so good.
Well, Gloria, congratulations on With Love. It's streaming on Amazon Prime, and best of luck to you and the entire cast and crew at this year's Emmys. And thank you for spending some time with Gold Derby today.
Thank you, guys.
Hello, everyone. I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby, and I'm thrilled to be joined by this incredible panel of producers and showrunners: Melissa Joan Hart from Christmas in Tune on Lifetime, Sarah Burgess from Impeachment on FX, Justin Noble from The Sex Lives of College Girls on HBO Max, Dustin Lance Black from Under the Banner of Heaven on FX, and Gloria Calderon Kellett from With Love on Amazon Prime. You know, I love the diversity of projects here. You know, we've got drama, comedy, TV movies. I'm curious, since you guys have all been in that producer's chair, you know, what's your worst nightmare as a showrunner, a producer, executive producer? You know, when you're in the middle of a project, what's the worst thing that can happen to sort of throw you off? I'm going to start with Melissa.
A COVID infection would be pretty.
Yeah, COVID positive in Zone A. Yeah, I think is up there.
That's pretty bad right now. That's something that's a new threat.
Yeah.
So Melissa, you expand. You go first.
Oh gosh. I mean, look, there's always going to be obstacles. There's always going to be mid-production disasters that need troubleshooting. And whether you do have an actor get sick or hurt themselves, or you have you know, you have a non-union project that gets flipped, or you have a lot of different things that you have to overcome sometimes. And you take it with stride. I mean, it's part of the business, and hopefully you've delegated it to the correct person. Hopefully you've got the right team in place, whether, from above the line, below the line. And, hopefully everybody can pull together and troubleshoot, but it happens on every project. I mean, last year I'm shooting a movie in Montana, and the fires broke out, and we're supposed to be shooting these, huge vistas and show the scenery. We're in Montana to show Montana, and the fires broke out. What are you going to do? I mean, we tried to make it as safe as possible. We kept our distance from the fires, changed locations, but ultimately we couldn't make the movie look the way we wanted it to look. But that wasn't obviously we also had COVID infections, and and it was all in the A zone. So it was tough.
I would say disasters aside, like one of the things that's like a nightmare for me on the comedy side is like a scene that just feels fine, like where people aren't really having fun, like, and you're just like getting through it. Because if a scene's great and it's kicking and everyone's hitting and everyone knows what they're doing, there's nothing better than that in a comedy. And the crew's laughing to the point where they're ruining takes. Like, I'll take that problem any day of the week. And if a scene's a disaster, you get in there, you rewrite it, and there's energy and it comes to life. And then if the scene's in the middle, that's where it's like, well, what do we do here? Is this helping our day if we get through it? Or do you just like jump out of your chair and just try to like give it some more life? So for me, that's where it's like most fun to get in there and give new comedy and change up lines on the day and get back into like some of the like, live performance that I think a lot of us started out with when we were like young in middle school and high school, that made us want to do this career and just like reinvigorate what we're doing on a soundstage, what we're so privileged to do.
Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, I really agree with that. I wasn't writing comedy, obviously, but like first of all, I was working with a bunch of very, very good producers who helped to shoulder some of the load of things like a messed up location. And I won't open the COVID door again, but obviously that's like a debacle you can't get past. As a writer, my worst moments are like writing so many scenes of this show. It's like faced with a scene that I can't figure out at first, or that, yes, it feels flat when you're sitting there with actors. If I feel that I am not in touch with like the point of a scene or something what the character is doing, it's usually a sign of a larger problem. And there's ways out of that. Obviously that can happen when you're writing a play. It can happen a ton of times, but that goes to like that goes to a part of my job, or the part of that is quite vulnerable and feels very, I'm very obsessive about. And so that's usually on this past project, especially because the writing load was the main thing on my shoulders. That's where you have to stop everything and like sort of figure out if you're going to lock yourself in a hotel or what kind of melodramatic thing you're going to do to get out of it.
And Lance, what's a story you have from your history?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think everyone is agreeing on here that, time is, your friend and your enemy, and any, it determines the scope and scale of your canvas. So whether it's in the writer's room and you're losing time because you're stuck on something, or the car won't start. We had that in the middle of the desert. When we were shooting, it's whatever is robbing you of more time when you can be creating. You could either be writing or working with the actors or editing. Those are the nightmares. And on this show in particular, it was just that we were shooting in Calgary, which was a great double for Salt Lake City in 1984 in the summer. But our show takes place in July of 1984, and it was negative 28 degrees come November. Every time we lost a half day or a day or scenes had to be pushed, we knew we were going to push deeper into snow. And that was terrifying sometimes.
And Gloria, how about you?
For me, it's when something goes wrong on set, it makes you really realize and be grateful for all of the department heads and all of the 200 people on these sets that make it so that we can do this job. Because I've worked on, I've been so lucky, so I hesitate to even bring it up because it's gone so well for me. But I've been on shows as a writer where you get to set and you're like, this is supposed to be a fancy restaurant, or the wardrobe is like it's black and she's supposed to like dump wine on herself and be upset. Like, we need a different dress. Like, all of those little things that if everyone is doing their job perfectly, you don't have those. And so you realize like, oh, all those times nothing is going wrong in those spaces. I need to like kiss the feet of all the department heads who are consistently making it so that we can be doing what we're doing. So just having a great crew and being so grateful to them.
And just as a last question to each of you, I'm just curious. I like to ask people who have been in the industry for quite a while, what inspired you? What is that series or film that had an impact on you as a kid or even recently? That's just something you could watch over and over again, either film or TV series. And I'll start with Lance.
Oh boy, no pressure. As a kid, a TV series, MASH. I was obsessed with MASH growing up. And one day I hope I can write like that, where you can take really dark, deep, challenging subjects and get people to laugh. That'd be great. I'm with you, Sarah. I want to write a comedy about my marriage one day. I'm just not adept. I'm not good at it yet. Justin, Gloria, you guys help. But yeah, that show inspired me, I guess, as a kid to want to get into the game.
Gloria, how about you?
I Love Lucy. 100% I Love Lucy for many reasons. I mean, the biggest one, I watched it as a kid just because I loved it and I thought it was so funny. And obviously there was a Cuban guy that sounded just like my dad. So that was super cool. But I didn't really realize until years later the scope with which Desi Arnaz's life would have impacted mine, because him being on television in 1952 created a path for my parents to come here in 1962. And feelings about Cubans in this country at the time, because of Desi Arnaz, made it so that they had a really clear path to citizenship, were able to get loans to buy a home and send me to college. All of that was because Desi Arnaz was on television. And so half for the love of just the show and the quality of how funny it was, and half for the cultural impact that it had on my life.
Justin?
Mine's a little split, which is that I'm a little bit of a gay stereotype, and that I grew up wanting to be like the women on SNL in the 90s. I just loved them all so much, and they made me want to do comedy. But the thing that made me want to be a TV writer was 6 Feet Under. And I think it was just I was at this age in high school, and I was seeing this queer couple who had a nuanced dynamic and story on TV in this well-produced show. And it really told me what TV could be. I had never really seen a series that could tackle things like that. And actually just this week, for the first time, my show filmed in the house that 6 Feet Under was filmed in for 2 days. And it was kind of a really emotional experience. We were filming very funny things, but I was going through something very different inside, because it was literally the building that made me want to be doing what I was doing. It was kind of a really nice week last week.
Wow. And Sarah?
What I'm writing right now has a bunch of scenes of 9 people at a table. And so somebody sent me a clip from Beetlejuice of that dinner scene. And I I didn't realize how much that movie is entirely imprinted on like my cells. And I don't know, I can draw no connection between Beetlejuice and like the impeachment of Bill Clinton, but that movie, there's something in that movie, like every time I watch even a scene of it, it like clearly like so deep in me. And I don't know if it's just like, I mean, his brilliance in directing that and creating that world and like that character and all of those performances, it's just, there's such fun in that and such pleasure. And it's like, and darkness. And I love that movie. That's all I can say right now in this Zoom, even though it's hard for me to articulate a connection to my current work. I just want everyone to know I love Beetlejuice. That's all.
And Melissa, bring us home.
I mean, I would have to say, as far as television goes, when I was a child, I mean, it was Shirley Temple who inspired me in my career very early on. I just thought she was so talented, and how could she do so many great things? I want to be like that. But then it was really like, as far as television goes, I think it was The Cosby Show. Just watching that family and being able to work through problems together and have a dad who was so present. My father was a fisherman, and just like, I didn't see, he was around, but he wasn't like, and we have a great relationship, but he wasn't like always around like the way, Dr. Huxtable was in the house. And I felt like I really liked watching that family. But also once I found out Malcolm Jamal Warner was directing, that spoke to me as like a teenager. I was sort of like, I guess I was a little bit younger than teenager. I was like, that's cool. Like, I want to do that. That seems really, he's doing this, but he's also doing that. And what if I could do both? And it kind of went back to the Shirley Temple thing of like, she can sing and dance and act. And, so I don't know. That really kind of made me, between him and then Fred Savage starting to direct, that made me want to go into a different path.
Wow. Well, Melissa, Sarah, Justin, Lance, Gloria, congratulations on all of your projects this television season. Best of luck at the Emmy Awards. And thank you so much for coming together and taking part in our panel. And it was so much fun to hear stories from each one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denton. Thank you so much.
Meet you all.
You all.
Guys,
Bye.
so great.
Everyone.